So first, you want to cut a hole that is twice the size of the diameter of this container. It has to be at least twice the size of it. When you first dig out your hole, you want to make sure that you're separating soil from sod. And sod is this, like, with the top layer of grass. And then the next thing that you're gonna do, get it out of the pot. You're gonna put it over, making sure that you're being gentle. Next thing I'm gonna do is gonna look for the root flare. You'll find the root flare where the first major root starts coming out. You see major roots coming out right here, right here.
Okay, great.
So I just like to loosen it up so that the roots aren't girdling and that the tree doesn't choke itself out. Just don't be afraid to be aggressive with it a little bit. Right here is the root flare. You can see that because there are major roots coming out from the trunk right there. And that's what you want to keep exposed so that once you put it into the hole, it has enough room to breathe. Because if you cover the root flare, the tree won't be able to breathe, and you could also cause fungal issues like those volcano mulches, and that can kill it because it makes it prone to pests and diseases. I just really like to make sure fully you can see it. See that major root right there. You could just use your fingers, or sometimes we use like wooden clay sculptor. Just go gently around it to get all the dirt, like the soil off of it. I might decide to hit it with a little bit of water just to get all the soil off of those roots. So the next step is to always remember to take off the tags off of your trees, because I always forget, and you really don't want to put it in the hole and then forget about it. Reason is because you don't want this tie right here to like choke out the branch. The thing about trees is that when they have a wound, they just encapsulate over it. And so anything that's stuck inside will just be stuck inside there. Even if you cut this off, just a little piece in there will get stuck in there. Pick up this tree. Next thing I'm gonna do is place it in the hole and check with a flat object. In this case, I'm going to use a stake. You want to make sure that the root flare is at level with the ground where you've cut it open right here. So as you can see, the root flare is at perfect level with the ground. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this soil here that was in the pot. It'll help it acclimate into the new hole, because before it was really comfortable in its home, and now we're moving it and it's kind of stressed out. Soil. So what I like to do is make a layer of soil and then water, soil, water. So I like to get the water directly onto the root ball, because then that way you're making sure that the roots are getting enough water that they need, and also it's going to help the tree settle into the hole. It'll just sink in there. That's why you put layers of soil, water. And it's okay if your root flare is just a little bit higher than the ground, because like I said, it's going to settle in there. So it's better that maybe you put it a little higher, because it'll settle. You don't want to plant it too deep, because then again you'll have that issue with the girdling roots and the tree won't be able to breathe. You always want to make sure that that root flare is exposed. So if you want to come closer, sometimes what we'll do is we'll choose to prune some of the roots. At this point, this right here is too mature to cut it off. If we cut it, it'll stress it out too much. Yeah. But maybe you could go ahead and cut this one. And when it's in the pot, it really doesn't have room to like spread outwards like that. Yeah. So that's why it just kind of entangles in on itself there. Okay. Oh. Okay. Nice. Yeah. You always want to be mindful of the positioning of your tree, of how the branches are growing out. Because in this location, we have a fence right there. So if I had positioned the tree this way, then the branches would grow over there, and that would hinder its growth. So here we're giving it the maximum amount of space that it can get in order to grow out to its full potential. Again, I like to get the soil from the pot because it likes it that best.
So why do you like to alternate soil, water, soil, water?
The tree will just sink into it, and it also encourages it to grow.
Yeah.
Because it's a dry day out today. It's been in the pot for a while. You don't know when the last time it was watered. You can never be too careful. So an important part of layering the soil and water is making sure that you get the air pockets out. Poke it so that the water just seeps in there. You're gonna take this top layer of grass, you're gonna turn it upside down, grass facing down. You're gonna just make a ring around the tree with it. And this helps so that when we water the tree, the water doesn't just sink out onto the soil. It creates like a mound so that the water stays inside the pit of the tree. So next step is starting to mulch. Bring this bag over. We used cedar mulch. You don't have to use cedar mulch. You can also use just like other kinds of wood chips, leaf compost. But if you're gonna use compost, don't put it inside the hole. You just want to put it on the top layer. But you can also add biochar if you want inside the hole. That's okay. That'll help the tree grow. But I don't recommend putting any compost inside the pit. And first, I just dump it out. You want 3 feet in diameter, 3 inches away from the root flare, and 3 inches thick. So just remember that 3 by 3 rule. 3 feet in diameter, 3 inches away from the root flare, and then 3 inches deep. That's good. The next step would be staking the tree. You want to take the stake, make it diagonal to the tree, like this. Yeah. The next thing you're gonna do is take some arbor tie or something like this. The arbor tie, you're gonna tie a running bowline knot, but with this, you can just take this and with either the arbor tie or this, you're gonna attach it to like somewhere in like a mid trunk right here. Make sure that you're not tying it too tight because remember that anything you put on the tree is gonna grow. And you want to make sure that it has enough slack on it so that it's not like compressing it in like that. And you can take And the reason that you stake the tree is so that when the wind starts blowing through this, because a young tree like this can easily be blown over, and that'll kill the tree. So you want to train it by putting these ties on it so that it'll have this tension. That way, as it matures, it has the strength to stand up against wind. So after a year, you're gonna take it off, and by then the tree should be strong enough to hold itself in the ground because it's just a newly planted tree. It's not well established enough in the soil. The root ball is not well established in the soil, so it's very easy for it to just knock over. And this will give it a fighting chance against the wind. So again, you just want to make sure that there's enough tension. You don't want to pull too hard, but you want to make sure there's enough tension between the stake and the tree. So you see here. Nice. And the next thing you want to do is put a watering bag around it. I think you should put it around the stake. The reason we say the stake is because the roots will be more encouraged to grow outwards and to reach the water, just establish themselves more into the soil. We're not a big fan of putting it directly on the tree because that can cause fungal issues and make it more prone to pests and diseases.
What if I don't have one of these? Should I just go get one at Home Depot?
You don't have to. You
Yeah.
can just like take a 5-gallon bucket and just dump water in there. Just flood it with there. I would put at least 10 gallons of water. In the spring, you just want you want to water it once a week. In the summer, depending on the weather, on how dry it gets, you might have to water twice a week. But just to make sure that the tree is getting enough water that it needs to grow. And then it's just as simple as just turning on the faucet and letting it flow. And there you go. You have your newly planted beautiful tree.